In Italy, prostitution is legal, but organized prostitution is prohibited. Brothels became illegal in 1958. Sex workers in Italy are often referred to as lucciole. History. Prostitution thrived in Italy in the Middle Ages. The city of Venice declared in 1358 that brothels were indispensable, and courtesans achieved high social status in Venice, particularly in the 17th century. Regolamentazione, the regulation system of prostitution, was established in 1861, with Italian unification, modeled on the French Napoleonic system of reglementation and the Bureau des Moeurs. A decree of 1859, by Count Camillo Benso di Cavour to aid the French army which supported the Piedmontese against Austria, authorized the opening of houses controlled by the state for the exercise of prostitution in Lombardia. On 15 February 1860 the decree was signed into law with the enactment of the regulations of the Security Service on Prostitution. A further law, adopted on 29 March 1888, prohibited the selling of food and drinks, and parties, dances and songs in the brothels and the opening of such homes near places of worship, schools and kindergartens. It also provided that the shutters should always remain closed, hence the name «case chiusa», or «closed houses». A further amendment was the Legge Nicotera of 1891. Under this system, prostitution in Italy was fully legal in private houses. A system of syphilicomi were set up under the belief that they were the sources of venereal disease. Although sex workers found this regulated system oppressive, they were able to develop ways to resist it. Under the fascists, more repressive measures were introduced in 1923, 1933 and 1940. Overall, the system was considered a failure, and as in other European countries with reglementation, movement for its abolition grew from the latter years of the 19th century from leftist and feminist groups. This abolitionism is often considered confusing, since it has been applied to both the abolition of regulation and the abolition of prostitution. However, these forces led to the introduction of a new system in Italy that abolished regulation, but not prostitution. Legge Merlin L. 75/58. The Legge Merlin L. 75/1958 became effective on 20 September 1958. This law, still in force today with little change, revoked the regulation system, closed the case chiusa and established a new offense called sfruttamento della prostituzione with the aim to punish pimping. Specifically, Article 3.8 provides penalties for chiunque in qualsiasi modo favorisca o sfrutti la prostituzione altrui. Article 3.3 lists places where prostitution is prohibited, such as houses, hotels, dance halls, entertainment clubs or other areas open to the public. Article 5 prohibits libertinaggio, in a public place or place open to the public, solicits in a scandalous or disturbing manner, or follows a person inviting him by acts or words. Article 7 prohibited registration and mandatory health checks. Theory: this follows the standard abolitionist control of prostitution policy prohibiting trafficking, exploitation and aiding and abetting of prostitution. What remained legal was street prostitution or independent sex work by a worker in their own home. The law was promoted as an equality measure liberating women, but despite its good intentions to give more rights to dependent prostitutes, was the subject of intense debate over the 10 years it took to come into effect and still continues today. The law specially refers to done. Result: the effect of the law was to push women out into the streets, becoming more visible, and into private homes. The law remained a subject of intense debate, with its defense being seen as a feminist issue, though both Marxists and Catholics support it. The Christian Democrats repeatedly sought the law's repeal from 1973, and in 1998 also the Democrats of the left, at least temporarily. This would have reopened the case. At the same time, conservative women's groups such as Fedeke Salinghi pushed for regulation, such as medical examinations, but feminists generally opposed this. However, surveys consistently suggest that there is considerable support for reopening the case. Following the founding of the Comitato, attempts to change the law continued, with 22 bills introduced in the 1996 to 2001 legislative session. Growing concerns over street prostitution and migration prostitution became much more visible in the early 1990s, with increasing migratory waves from Eastern Europe and Western Africa, which had begun in the 70s. The fall of the Soviet regime, the Yugoslavian War and new immigration policies contributed to an influx in 1989-90 from former Soviet bloc countries, Polish girls. A second wave came from Nigeria and Peru, using tourist visas that then expired, followed by Albania in 1993-4. The fourth wave were also again from Nigeria and Albania, while 1996-8 saw the arrival of migrants from Moldova and Lithuania as well as Albania. Immigration law became much more repressive in 1998 with the enactment of the Legge Turco Napolitano. Amongst these migrants were women who joined the sex trade with varying degrees of voluntariness, some enduring coercion and debt bondage, including underage girls. These issues of foreign nationals, coerced sex work and underage workers have reshaped the debate in Italy as elsewhere in recent years. Descriptions of the conditions of migrant women, particularly young women, on the street shifted the debate in the 90s from the Comitato's image of independent and assertive women to that of victims of male violence. One reaction of the local authorities was to withdraw residence permits from foreign women on the streets and deportation of the clandestine. Street prostitution. With migration, street prostitution became more visible, the workers being considered to now be mainly foreigners. In turn, this created another force-driving policy. Community groups from neighborhoods where street prostitution was most visible, particularly from the 1990s. Municipalities have also tried to police sex work themselves since 1994, including targeting clients, sending notices to their homes and confiscating vehicles, although charging clients with aiding and abetting was blocked by a tribunal in Perugia in September 2000. Continuing police activity became a national focus following the suicide of a client that year. Another initiative was to create tolerance zones, such as in Mestre in 1995. A more tolerant approach has emerged from local authorities, based on Riduzione del Danno. Some municipal authorities have created confusion by erecting signs drawing attention to prostitution occurring in the neighborhood. Dealing with immigration, originally proposed by international agencies, and approved by the EU in 1996. The cause of protection of migrant workers was taken up in Italy by Maria Parola Colombo Svevo, president of Irene, an NGO, and by other Catholic and lay NGOs such as Caritas. While it was always possible to request a residency permit on humanitarian grounds, this was not well known or utilized by foreign sex workers. In 1996, Livia Turco, as Minister of Social Affairs, introduced the first justice permit for trafficking victims who renounced their traffickers. As a part of the Dini Decree on Immigration, Catholic organizations opposed the denunciation clause. The political initiative to address the situation of women migrant workers came from Anna Finocchiara, Minister of Equal Opportunities. Giorgio Napolitano, Interior Minister, announced new measures in 1997 to deal with prostitution as an urban safety issue, and there was little debate over the proposals given widespread concern over trafficking. The main opposing viewpoint was that residence permits should be granted only on the condition of denouncing traffickers. What debate there was essentially confined to the position of women. The resulting legislation was the Legge Turco Napolitano of 1998, jointly sponsored by Livia Turco, The position of the women's movement was that victims should not be further victimized by being expelled to their home country sans papiers in a possible life-threatening situation. Measures included increasing penalties for recruiting and trafficking, and allowing victims of trafficking to stay in the country under a protection permit. The permits were administered by the questor on humanitarian grounds, but this concerned NGOs because of the complexity of the procedures and the potential for arbitrariness. The victim then had to enroll in training courses organized by approved NGOs. The law also allocated funds for associations assisting these victims, but did require them to exit sex work, although they were supposed to denounce it. The requirement for denunciation in the original Dini decree was removed. In advocating this, Turco was influenced by the Commission for Equal Opportunities, whose first president, Elena Marinucci, had embraced the aims of the Comitato and attempted to legislate this in 1987. Amongst critics were the Comitato, who objected to prostitution as something that women required to be protected from, without addressing stigmatization. However, Catholic organizations dominated the list of approved agencies and followed this belief. However, the debates did distinguish between forced prostitution and a free and conscious choice of the individual. Although the law was not explicitly targeted at sex work, its implementation was. Despite gender-neutral language, the implementation focused on young female victims of trafficking, driven by populist media imagery. The new law did little to stem the debate. When the Lima government was elected later that year, 3 women ministers from 3 parties, Laura Balbo, Rosa Russo Gervolino and Livia Turco, announced they would look at new proposals on trafficking and defend the dignity of women. The result was a new prominence for Anna Finocchiara's consultative body, the Interministerial Table for the Fight Against Trafficking, with wide representation. Finocchiara had declared, trafficking in women is a new and very serious problem that we have to combat primarily with the punishment for reduction into slavery, instead of using the Merlin Law, In March 1999, the ministers announced new more severe penalties for exploitation and new rules for protection of those who renounced prostitution. In November, an interministerial commission was established to implement Article 18 of L. 4098. Available statistics for 1998 report 342 known victims, 37% of whom minors, and predominantly from Albania, Nigeria and Yugoslavia. 242 permits were granted in 1999 and 600 in 2000. Progita di Leg Carfagna until 2008. Although there were no laws against street prostitution, other laws concerning public order and decency could be used, and some places had local ordinances against street prostitution. Regular attempts were made to criminalize outdoor work. Bill 1079 in 2008. A further new Progita di Leg outlawing street prostitution was introduced by Mara Carfagna, Minister for Equal Opportunities, and approved by the Consiglio DEI Ministry on the 11th of September. Scope: the bill is framed as an amendment to the Leg Merlin of 20 February 1958, number 75, by providing for penalties for the act of prostitution, solicitation or availing oneself of sexual services in a place open to the public. Article 2 amends Article 600 bis of the Penal Code to provide penalties for recruiting, inducing, promoting, using, managing, organizing, controlling, or profiting from the sexual services of a person under 18, or for those promising any kind reward for a sexual act with a person between 14 and 18. It also provides for repatriation of foreign minors engaging in prostitution. Article 3 deals with organized crime, penalizing conspiracy to exploit prostitution via Article 416 of the Penal Code. Article 4 provides no new resources and repeals Article 5 of the Leg Merlin, which it replaces, prohibiting libertinagio subject to up to 15 days imprisonment. legislative history. The bill was introduced into the Senate, where it has been debated in committee in conjunction with a group of related bills. In interviews with Gente and Panorama, Carafagna stated that she was declaring war on prostitution and criticized opponents who proposed Cortiera Lucy Ross. It remains firmly on the agenda of the Berlusconi government, despite the sex work scandals that continue to be associated with him. This has been achieved by packaging anti-prostitution measures into security packages, frustrated by the slow passage of the actual legislation. As with previous attempts, this has attracted much criticism. Opposition. The bill is opposed by the Catholic Church, sex workers' harm reduction advocates, feminist groups, human rights and immigrant groups, and lawyers, and continues to be a matter of both popular and academic debate. Carafagna believes it is necessary to combat trafficking. 2008 ordinances. The Domestic Security Regulations of 24 July 2008 gave mayors judicial power to declare anything that might endanger the security and decorum of their cities an emergency. Under these powers, sex workers and clients have been subjected to ordinances that permit municipal police to administer fines. The public security law enables police chiefs to expel persons from a city in which they do not officially reside. EU citizens are subject to fines, while non-EU citizens may be placed in detention centres and deported. The Comitato reports a breakdown in relationships between NGOs and authorities and between NGOs and workers, an avoidance of health services and an increase in criminal activity. While enforcement varies by region and over time, the immediate effect has been the expected and desired one of clearing the streets and displacing workers to remote areas. Indoors work has increased and quality of life in general has deteriorated. Unprotected sex has increased due to reduced ability to negotiate. Stigmatization and vulnerability have increased, as has a greater reliance on social services. As noted in other countries, as soon as police activity is reduced, older work patterns reappear. On April 7, 2011, the Italian Constitutional Court, with the sentence N. 115/2011, decided that this kind of mayor's ordinances must have time and space limits and urgent conditions to be issued. So, the simple exercise of street prostitution could be no more persecuted by this kind of local bills. Legal status. Prostitution is legal. Brothels and pimping are illegal. Single sex workers working from apartments are tolerated. Loitering is permitted but soliciting is illegal. Migrants with work or residence permits may work in sex work, and police cannot revoke residence permits, and began deportation procedures as they tried, failing by the Italian laws. Work permits can be issued to migrant dancers in entertainment clubs for 1 year in a single workplace. Sex work is forbidden but nude dancing is tolerated. Suspicions of sexual encounters lead to club closures. Case law. A 2010 court decision created a new precedent that clients who did not pay the worker would be considered guilty of rape. This was considered a major breakthrough for sex workers' rights.